Jacob's journey begins under the vast, starry skies, alone and uncertain about the future. He had spent years deceiving and striving, always trying to secure blessings by his own means. But as he stepped into the unknown, God was preparing him for a transformation far greater than anything he could have imagined. Jacob's story is one of struggle, redemption, and renewal, showing us that no matter our flaws, God's grace can reach us wherever we are. In this message, we will explore the incredible journey of Jacob, a man who went from wrestling with his brother to wrestling with God. His life shows us how our most profound encounters with God often come during times of hardship and challenge. Join us as we journey through Jacob's story and discover how, in the midst of life's struggles, we too can find divine blessings and transformation. Jacob's journey begins long before his famous encounter with God. Born to Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob entered a world where sibling rivalry was destined from the start. Even in the womb, Jacob wrestled with his twin brother Esau. This struggle for dominance foreshadowed the many challenges and confrontations Jacob would face throughout his life. For Jacob, life was never about ease. It was about endurance. His name itself meant supplanter, hinting at the twists and turns his journey would take. As a young man, Jacob found himself in the middle of a family conflict. His mother Rebekah favored him, while his father Isaac leaned toward Esau. This division created an environment where deception became a means to survival. Jacob, with his mother's help, devised a plan to secure the blessing that traditionally belonged to the firstborn. The blessing was more than just words. It was a spiritual inheritance, a promise of God's favor and a future filled with prosperity. This moment was pivotal, not just for Jacob, but for the entire history of Israel. After deceiving his father and taking Esau's blessing, Jacob had to flee from his home. Fearful of his brother's anger, he left everything familiar behind, embarking on a journey into the unknown. Imagine the anxiety that filled Jacob's heart. Would he ever see his family again? Would he be able to survive on his own? These questions must have plagued him as he walked away from the only life he had ever known. Yet, even in this moment of uncertainty, God had a plan for him. Jacob's journey was not just a physical one, it was deeply spiritual. As he moved further from his home, he moved closer to an encounter that would change his life forever. The long stretches of wilderness must have felt like an endless test of endurance. Yet, with every step, Jacob grew more aware of his need for something greater than himself, something only God could provide. The first night Jacob spent alone in the wilderness was a profound one. With nothing but a stone for a pillow, he lay down to sleep, uncertain of what the future held. This image of Jacob resting in the wilderness serves as a powerful reminder that even in the most desolate moments of our lives, God is with us. Just as Jacob would soon discover, we are never truly alone on our journeys. And so, Jacob's journey began, a journey filled with struggle, growth, and divine encounters. Little did he know that each step was leading him toward a moment that would define not only his life, but the future of an entire nation. Jacob's life was marked by a deep desire for his father's blessing, a symbol of favor and divine approval. This blessing, in ancient times, was more than just a gesture. It was a declaration of the future, a prophetic word over the life of the one who received it. Jacob, despite being the younger twin, longed for what was traditionally reserved for the firstborn. The struggle between Jacob and Esau grew as they matured, culminating in Jacob's deceptive act to claim what he believed was his. With his mother's guidance, Jacob tricked his blind father, Isaac, into blessing him instead of Esau. It was an act of manipulation, but beneath the surface lay a deeper spiritual hunger. Jacob was not just chasing after material wealth. He was pursuing a future with God's favor. Yet the method by which he obtained the blessing cast a shadow over his success. The tension between human ambition and divine will is a theme that runs throughout Jacob's story, reminding us that even when we receive what we desire, the path we take matters. Esau's heartbreak was palpable. The Bible tells us that he wept bitterly when he realized what had been taken from him. Jacob, on the other hand, found himself in a precarious position. He had secured the blessing, but at the cost of his relationship with his brother and the peace in his family. Often, in our pursuit of what we believe is rightfully ours, we forget the impact it has on those around us. Jacob's actions fractured his family and set the stage for years of separation. This moment in Jacob's life teaches us a valuable lesson about striving for blessings. How often do we, like Jacob, push ahead in our own strength, forgetting to trust in God's timing? Jacob's impatience led him to take matters into his own hands. And though he received the blessing, he also inherited the consequences of his choices. The road ahead would be long, and the pain of separation from his family would weigh heavily on him. But God, in his mercy, does not abandon us when we make mistakes. Jacob's story shows that even in our failings, God's plan continues. The blessing Jacob received was still valid, and God would work through his flawed choices to fulfill his promises. This is a comforting reminder that, despite our imperfections, God's grace is greater than our missteps. And so, Jacob moved forward, blessed yet burdened. His journey was far from over, and the struggles that lay ahead would shape him in ways he could not yet imagine. As Jacob continued his journey away from home, something extraordinary happened that would mark his spiritual life forever. One night, while sleeping under the stars, Jacob had a vision of a ladder stretching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending on it. This wasn't just a dream, it was a divine revelation, a moment where heaven touched earth and God revealed himself in a way that Jacob had never experienced before. In the vision, God stood above the ladder and spoke to Jacob, renewing the promise he had made to Jacob's grandfather, Abraham. God reassured Jacob that the land he was lying on would belong to him and his descendants. This encounter was significant because, up until this point, Jacob had been striving and struggling for his own gain. But now, God was directly showing him that the blessings he sought were not a result of his own doing. They were part of a divine plan, far greater than he could have imagined. This vision of the ladder is rich in symbolism. The ladder represents the connection between heaven and earth, a bridge that only God can provide. For Jacob, it was a turning point in his understanding of God's presence. He realized that even in his wandering, God was with him. How comforting is this for us today? No matter where we find ourselves, whether in times of struggle or peace, God is there, reaching down to us, offering his guidance and blessings. Jacob awoke from the dream with a renewed sense of purpose. He took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it up as a pillar, pouring oil over it as an offering to God. In this moment, Jacob made a vow, declaring that if God would protect him on his journey and bring him back to his father's house, then the Lord would be his God. This was more than just a promise. It was Jacob's way of acknowledging God's authority over his life. The vision of the ladder wasn't just for Jacob, it's a message for all of us. It reminds us that no matter how far we roam, God's presence is always near. We may feel like we are alone, but the ladder between heaven and earth is still there, inviting us to trust in his plan and his promises. If this message of Jacob's journey resonates with you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever experienced a time when God revealed himself in an unexpected way? Share your story in the comments below, or simply write the word hope as a symbol of your faith journey. We'd love to hear how God has been at work in your life. After his life-changing vision, Jacob continued his journey and eventually arrived at the land of his relatives. It was here that he met Laban, his uncle, a man who would play a significant role in shaping the next season of Jacob's life. Upon arrival, Jacob fell in love with Rachel, Laban's daughter, and quickly decided that he wanted to marry her. However, the road to their union was far from easy. Laban agreed to give Rachel to Jacob in marriage, but only after Jacob worked for him for 7 years, 7 long years of labor, sweat, and patience, all in the hope of being with the woman he loved. But for Jacob, the time passed quickly because of his deep affection for Rachel. The Bible describes this period as though the years were but a few days, a beautiful reminder of how love can make even the hardest times more bearable. However, Laban had a different plan. On the night of the wedding, Laban deceived Jacob by giving him his eldest daughter, Leah, instead of Rachel. It was a shocking betrayal. Jacob had worked faithfully for 7 years, and in return, he was tricked in the same way he had once deceived his own brother, Esau. The irony was not lost on Jacob, who now understood the pain of being on the other side of deception. Yet, Jacob's love for Rachel did not waver. When he confronted Laban, he agreed to work another 7 years to finally marry her. This test of patience and endurance shows us that sometimes the blessings we seek are delayed, not denied. Jacob's journey with Laban was a lesson in perseverance and trust in God's timing. Though the wait was long, his love for Rachel sustained him through the years. Jacob's time with Laban also highlighted the difficulties of family relationships. Laban was not just his employer, he was family, and navigating that dynamic required wisdom and grace. Jacob had to balance his own desires with the demands and expectations placed upon him by his uncle. Family can be both a source of joy and challenge, and Jacob's experience reminds us that patience is often required in our closest relationships. Ultimately, Jacob did marry Rachel, but his time with Laban was filled with challenges that shaped his character. Through hard work, deception, and endurance, Jacob learned that sometimes the greatest rewards come through trials. And in the end, it wasn't just Rachel that Jacob gained. He also came to understand the value of persistence and faith. One of the most profound moments in Jacob's life came on a night when he found himself utterly alone. He had sent his family and possessions ahead and was left by himself in the darkness, facing the weight of his past. The fear of reuniting with his brother Esau after years of estrangement weighed heavily on him. But what Jacob didn't know was that this night would not be about Esau. It would be about a life-changing encounter with God. In the stillness of the night, Jacob was suddenly confronted by a mysterious figure, and a physical struggle ensued. This wasn't just a dream or vision. Jacob was locked in a literal wrestling match with God. The Bible describes the struggle as lasting until daybreak, a testament to Jacob's determination and strength. But this wasn't merely a fight for survival. Jacob was wrestling for a blessing, for an assurance that his past would no longer define his future. As the dawn began to break, the man with whom Jacob wrestled touched his hip, dislocating it, yet Jacob refused to let go. Even in pain, he clung tightly, declaring, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." This powerful statement reveals Jacob's deep hunger for God's favor. After years of striving and struggling for blessings in his own strength, Jacob now sought a blessing that could only come from the one who held his future in his hands. In response, God asked Jacob a pivotal question: "What is your name?" This question forced Jacob to confront his identity. The last time he had been asked his name, he had lied to his father, pretending to be Esau. Now, standing before God, Jacob had to admit who he really was, both his past failures and his desire for a new beginning. In this moment of vulnerability, God gave him a new name, Israel, which means he who struggles with God. This name was more than just a title. It was a declaration of a new destiny. This encounter is a profound reminder of how God meets us in our struggles. Jacob's wrestling match wasn't just a fight. It was a moment of transformation. God doesn't avoid our struggles. He enters into them with us. And just as Jacob was changed that night, so are we changed when we hold on to God, even in the midst of our greatest battles. With a new name and a limp that would serve as a lifelong reminder of his encounter with God, Jacob emerged from that night forever changed. His story teaches us that sometimes it's in the wrestling that we find our greatest breakthroughs. The night Jacob wrestled with God was more than just a physical struggle. It marked a spiritual transformation. From that moment on, Jacob would no longer be known by his old name, which carried the weight of deception and striving. Instead, he would be called Israel, a name that represented his new identity as one who had wrestled with God and prevailed. This shift was significant, not just for Jacob, but for the generations that would come after him, as Israel would become the name of God's chosen people. For years, Jacob had lived up to the meaning of his former name, supplanter or deceiver. He had tricked his brother Esau, deceived his father Isaac, and spent much of his life striving to gain what he believed he deserved. But in the moment God gave him a new name, it signified the end of that season of his life. No longer would he be defined by his past mistakes or the ways he had fallen short. Instead, he would be known as Israel, a man chosen and blessed by God. This transformation reminds us of the power of God's grace. Just as Jacob was given a new identity, we too are offered a fresh start through our faith. God sees beyond our mistakes and failures, offering us the opportunity to walk in the fullness of his promises. Jacob's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how far we may have strayed, God can redeem our past and give us a future filled with hope. Jacob's new name also carried with it a new responsibility. As Israel, he was no longer just a man on a personal journey. He was the father of a nation. The 12 tribes of Israel, which would come from his 12 sons, would carry forward the legacy of God's promises to Abraham and Isaac. This shift in identity was not just about Jacob's personal transformation. It was about his role in God's larger plan for his people. The limp that Jacob carried after his encounter with God became a symbol of his new identity. Though he had been wounded, he was also blessed. This is a powerful reminder that sometimes our deepest struggles lead to our greatest blessings. Jacob's limp was a physical reminder of the night he encountered God, a symbol of his perseverance and God's faithfulness. In life, we often experience moments where God calls us to step into a new identity. Just as Jacob became Israel, we are invited to leave behind our old ways and embrace the future God has for us. It may not always be easy, and we may carry the scars of our struggles, but just like Jacob, those scars can become reminders of God's transforming power in our lives. After years of separation, Jacob was about to face one of the most daunting moments of his life, his reunion with Esau. The last time they had been together, Jacob had deceived his brother, stealing his blessing and fleeing in fear of Esau's wrath. Now, as Jacob returned to the land of his father, he knew he would have to confront the brother he had wronged. Would Esau still be angry? Would this meeting end in conflict? These questions must have weighed heavily on Jacob's heart. As he prepared for the encounter, Jacob sent gifts ahead to Esau as a gesture of peace. He divided his family and flocks, hoping to minimize the damage if Esau attacked. Yet, despite all of Jacob's efforts to control the situation, there was an undeniable sense that the outcome was in God's hands. Jacob had wrestled with God the night before, and now he had to face the consequences of his past actions, trusting that God would guide the outcome. The moment of reunion arrived, and to Jacob's surprise, Esau did not come with anger or vengeance. Instead, Esau ran to meet Jacob, embracing him with tears of forgiveness. This moment of reconciliation was one of the most touching in the entire Bible. Two brothers, once divided by deceit and bitterness, were brought back together through grace and forgiveness. It is a powerful reminder of the healing that can come when we allow God to mend broken relationships. Jacob's humility played a crucial role in this reconciliation. He bowed before Esau, calling him "my lord" and referring to himself as Esau's servant. This act of humility showed Jacob's recognition of his past wrongs and his willingness to make amends. In our own lives, when we seek forgiveness, humility is often the key to unlocking the door to reconciliation. It takes courage to admit when we've done wrong, but it is through that vulnerability that healing can occur. Esau's response was equally significant. Rather than holding on to bitterness or seeking revenge, he chose the path of forgiveness. In a world that often teaches us to hold grudges, Esau's actions remind us of the power of letting go and embracing those who have hurt us. His willingness to forgive Jacob paved the way for a restored relationship, one that was stronger than the past that had once torn them apart. This story of reunion between Jacob and Esau is a testament to the power of forgiveness. No matter how deep the wounds or how long the separation, reconciliation is possible when both parties are willing to let go of the past and embrace God's grace. For Jacob, this moment was a turning point. Not only did he regain his brother, but he also experienced firsthand the peace that comes from facing the past and finding forgiveness. Jacob's family was large, complex, and filled with both joy and heartache. As the father of 12 sons and 1 daughter, Jacob's household was destined to play a significant role in the unfolding of God's plan. Each of his sons would become the patriarch of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, but the journey to this legacy was not without its trials. Jacob's relationships with his children were marked by moments of intense love and deep sorrow, highlighting the challenges and blessings of family life. One of the most heart-wrenching stories within Jacob's family is the story of Joseph, his beloved son. Born to Rachel, the wife Jacob loved most, Joseph held a special place in Jacob's heart. This favoritism did not go unnoticed by his other sons, and it sparked jealousy and rivalry among them. Jacob's gift to Joseph of a richly ornamented robe only deepened the resentment. Family tensions rose as Joseph shared dreams of his future greatness, dreams that seemed to place him above his brothers. The result of this growing animosity would soon tear the family apart. Joseph's brothers, fueled by jealousy, made the devastating decision to sell him into slavery. They covered up their betrayal by faking Joseph's death, leaving Jacob heartbroken and inconsolable. For years, Jacob lived with the grief of believing his beloved son was gone forever. This story serves as a reminder of the pain that can arise from favoritism and unresolved conflicts within families. Yet, even in the midst of sorrow, God was at work behind the scenes, orchestrating a plan of redemption that Jacob could not yet see. Jacob's family also experienced moments of great triumph. Despite the tensions and conflicts, his sons would go on to form the foundation of the 12 tribes of Israel, fulfilling God's promise that Jacob's descendants would become a great nation. Even through their failings, God's hand remained upon Jacob's children, showing that his plans can prevail even in the midst of human weakness. Eventually, Jacob's story comes full circle when he is reunited with Joseph. After years of believing his son was dead, Jacob learned that Joseph was alive and had risen to a position of power in Egypt. This reunion was a moment of immense joy and restoration for Jacob. It reminded him, and reminds us, that God can bring about redemption even in the most broken of situations. What was once a story of betrayal and loss became a story of forgiveness and new beginnings. Jacob's family story teaches us that no family is perfect, but through God's grace, healing and restoration are always possible. The trials Jacob faced with his children were painful, but they ultimately led to moments of great blessing. For anyone who has experienced family conflict, Jacob's story offers hope that even the most fractured relationships can be mended by God's loving hand. As Jacob approached the later years of his life, the full weight of his legacy became clear. He was not just a man who had lived a life of struggle and blessing, he was the father of a nation. Through his 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel would come into being, fulfilling God's promise to Abraham and Isaac. Jacob's life, though marked by personal trials, became a cornerstone for God's plan to establish his people on earth. His story was not merely one of personal transformation, but one that would shape the future of an entire nation. Each of Jacob's sons carried a unique role in the formation of Israel. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and the others were the foundation upon which the tribes would be built. Judah, in particular, would hold a significant place in God's plan, as it was through his lineage that the Messiah, Jesus Christ, would eventually come. Though Jacob's family was far from perfect, God's promises remained steadfast, working through the imperfections to bring about his divine will. In reflecting on Jacob's legacy, we see the importance of faithfulness through generations. Jacob's relationship with God was not just for himself, it was a continuation of the covenant made with Abraham, passed down to Isaac and then to Jacob. This generational faithfulness is something we can all learn from. The choices we make today, our walk with God, can have an impact not only on our lives, but on the lives of those who come after us. Jacob's story encourages us to think beyond our own lifetime and consider the legacy of faith we leave behind. Jacob's legacy was also one of perseverance. Throughout his life, he faced countless challenges, family conflict, deception, loss, and hardship. Yet, through it all, he continued to trust in God's promises. His life reminds us that faith is not about having everything go perfectly. It's about trusting God through the ups and downs. Jacob's perseverance is a powerful example for us, showing that when we hold on to God, even in the most difficult times, he is faithful to fulfill his promises. At the end of his life, Jacob blessed each of his sons, passing on the promises of God to the next generation. This act of blessing was more than just a fatherly gesture. It was a prophetic declaration of what was to come. Each blessing carried significance, not only for the individual sons, but for the tribes that would descend from them. Jacob's final words to his children were a reminder of God's faithfulness and the continuation of his covenant. As we reflect on Jacob's legacy, we are reminded of the power of faithfulness, perseverance, and the promises of God. Jacob's life may have been filled with struggles, but it was also filled with blessings that extended far beyond his own lifetime. His story challenges us to consider the legacy we are building, one that, like Jacob's, can impact generations to come. Jacob's life, though filled with twists and turns, left an indelible mark not only on his descendants, but on the entire course of biblical history. His journey from being a man known for deception to one who wrestled with God and emerged transformed is a story of profound spiritual significance. Jacob's story serves as a powerful example of how God can take flawed individuals and use them for his greater purpose. His impact wasn't limited to his immediate family. It extended far beyond, shaping the course of a nation. One of the most unforgettable aspects of Jacob's life was his transformation. Jacob began his journey as a man driven by self-interest, striving to secure blessings through manipulation. Yet, through his encounters with God, particularly that night of wrestling, he was changed. His new name, Israel, became a symbol of his new identity, reflecting not just a personal change, but the birth of a nation. The impact of that transformation is still felt today, as the name Israel continues to resonate in the hearts of people around the world. Jacob's impact was also seen in his role as a father. The 12 sons he raised, though each unique, were destined to become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. Their stories, marked by both triumph and trial, would become part of the fabric of God's plan for his people. Jacob's influence as a father, despite the complexities and challenges of family life, was pivotal in the establishment of God's chosen people. The legacy of faith, hope, and perseverance that he passed down continues to inspire countless generations. Another significant impact of Jacob's life was his example of faith through adversity. Throughout his life, Jacob faced numerous challenges: family conflict, betrayal, loss, and uncertainty. Yet in the midst of these trials, he continually returned to God, trusting in his promises. Jacob's faithfulness, despite his flaws, is a reminder that God does not require perfection from us. He simply asks for our trust and obedience. Jacob's life teaches us that even in our weakest moments, God's strength is made perfect. The story of Jacob also reminds us of the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. His reunion with Esau after years of estrangement showed that even the deepest wounds can be healed when we allow God's grace to work in our lives. Jacob's willingness to humble himself and seek reconciliation is a powerful testimony of the peace that comes when we surrender our pride and embrace forgiveness. In the end, Jacob's life leaves us with a profound sense of hope. No matter how complicated our journeys may be, God's hand is always at work, guiding us toward his promises. Jacob's life story, from his struggles to his triumphs, is a testament to God's enduring faithfulness. His legacy challenges us to trust in God's plan for our lives, knowing that, like Jacob, we are part of a much bigger story, one that is filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of God's everlasting love. As we come to the end of Jacob's unforgettable journey, we are left with a powerful message of hope and transformation. Jacob's life, though filled with moments of deceit and struggle, ultimately became a testament to God's faithfulness. Through his wrestling with both man and God, Jacob discovered that the blessings he sought were not won by his own efforts, but were gifts from a loving God who had been with him all along. Jacob's story invites us to examine our own lives. Where have we been wrestling? What areas of our lives need God's touch? Just as Jacob received a new name and a new future, we too are offered a fresh start through God's grace. Let this story be a reminder that no matter where we are on our journey, God is with us, ready to transform our struggles into blessings. Before you go, take a moment to reflect on what part of Jacob's story spoke to your heart. Share this video with a friend or family member who might need encouragement, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting messages. As we continue on this journey together, may God bless you and guide you just as he did with Jacob.